Labas rytas. Dobre jutro. Dobry ranok. Shalom. Assalamu alaikum. Mano vardas Cheryl. Ash Ameriketje. Ash givnju sieto. Mano mekstamosia krepshininski. Ira su bird. Bet. Ash milju besbola. Lietuvoje bovau tris kartas. Thank you, everyone, for having me back. Thanks for coming to my session. Clicker. Oh, yeah. Tris cartas. When I was first here in 2010 as a tourist, I found the picture of the cover of my guidebook. Look. And I took the picture in the picture. I was really pleased with that. So that's me. I have been doing Agile software development for a long time. And there's some other fun facts about me. If you download the slides, you can check those out. Oh, those are my dogs. That's me. But what we're here to talk about is going back to the office. And so what I wanted to start with, I won't be able to show you a pretty slide with the results, but I'd love for you here in the room and everyone online to just hop on and give me your impressions. There's a series of questions on Menti that you should be able to scroll through at your own pace, just to get a sense of where you're at in returning from working at home to returning in an office. Because not all of us have done that. I've actually worked fully remote jobs since before the pandemic. But as a consultant, there was a big difference for me in going to the client site to visit them, to do my consulting work, versus trying to consult with organizations from my office via Zoom. Big difference. And some people, I think, were very excited to be able to go back in the office and see our colleagues again. And some of us were very comfortable in our pajamas at home, or both. So I'm really interested to know your impressions. I'm going to take a look and see where you're at. Hey, look at that. Yes. Time-consuming. Man, is there anything more wasteful than a commute? I think we can try to listen to podcasts. We can try to do some education. I used to read a lot more when I used to ride the bus to work, so fair enough. Overwhelming, less results. But I see good. I see expensive. Right, so impressions are coming in. Missing flexibility, long travel. But positive, talking, fun, around people. So you're all in a different, right? Some of those are probably the same person answering positive and negative. There are things about it that are great, things about it that are really difficult. I want to see. Majority of you so far are saying that you're back in the office part-time, which is a very common scenario that I'm going to talk about a little bit today. What's challenging? Getting up early. Getting the team into the office at the same time. Context switching. Great. Excellent. The team working agreement's one you can wait until later. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later. This is the first time I've used Menti. It's pretty cool. I like it. OK. Uh-oh. Now I got to get back to where I was. OK. So with that, here's roughly what I want to cover today. I'm going to give you fair warning. I'm the kind of speaker who tends to use up all my time and have no time left for questions. I'm going to see if I can rush through the presentation, but if you end up having questions that I don't have time to get to in this session, then put them on Whova or come find me. I'll be around today. So what does Agile have to tell us about returning to office? Obviously, the Agile Manifesto was in 2001. We didn't have a global pandemic at that time. But is there anything from the world of Agile that could help us understand how to navigate this new challenge? Perhaps there is. This one is my favorite. The best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. So for those, I didn't ask this question on the Menti, so I'll just have to ask it here. For those of you who are returning to office, how many of you is it mandatory? You are required to return. It wasn't your choice. I'm glad that there's not too many hands up. Where I'm from in Seattle, one of our largest employers is Amazon, and about 6 or 8 months ago, they implemented a mandatory 3 days. Mandatory 3 days in the office. And there's now a rumor in Amazon that they're going to move to mandatory 5 days. And I'll tell you what, I think the main reason for that is the incredible amount of money that Amazon spent building their campus. They created a lot of perfect buildings with perfect amenities years ago, right? Long time ago, that were designed to attract all these perfect teams and ways of working. And they're not going to be able to sell those. Those buildings are not paid for, right? They can't sell those buildings. They can't turn them into housing, though Lord knows we need them to. So I envision the C-suite sitting down and saying, we paid for all this real estate. You are, by God, going to come and work in it. That's my feeling. Of course, we also have the hypothesis that managers might like to keep more of an eye on you. And so I like to counter that by reminding ourselves that an ideal scenario really would be if the team could self-organize. Because we know a lot of people were tired of being isolated at home in the pandemic and would love to spend more collaborative time with their colleagues. We know this one, right? This is an old one, but the most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is a face-to-face conversation. They did not anticipate the existence of Zoom. I mean, they might have thought about it in 2001. So the question is, does Zoom count? Do you think Zoom counts for that? I see some shaking heads. I see some nodding. Yeah, right? Maybe. My favorite consultant answer. It depends. Maybe it does. What else? Build projects around motivated individuals. Give them the environment and the tools they need to be successful. Trust them to get the job done. That's a little bit the opposite of you have to come into the office 3 days so I can keep an eye on you, isn't it? I have talked to someone recently who said not only are they required to come back in the office, they're not allowed to choose which days, and they're not allowed to work from home on Monday or Friday, specifically because the employer doesn't want them to extend their weekend. What did we think working from home on a Monday was? That's not a day off. Working from home was working, was it not? I think we know this. We did it for 3 years. So the implication in that policy is pretty garbage, right? Don't like that at all. Finally, I think that one is pretty important. Working software, let's say working product, right? We had a high software bias in this manifesto. Let us say working product is the primary measure of success, progress, success. Not number of hours that you spent with your butt in an office chair. That's not a measure of progress. That's not a metric I would tell anybody to use. It's not an Agile metric. Hours in office. One of my metrics talks, I talk about measurements that are a proxy for other things. Butts in seats is not even a proxy for anything useful, right? It's the product. Just look at the product. If you're worried about whether your people are being productive enough at home, just look at the production. You don't need to look at the people. It's ridiculous. So I think Agile has quite a bit to say about returning to office. So now I want to talk about my favorite thing in the whole world that Agile prescribes for us, and that is self-organization. This is a picture of my office many years ago. We inherited an office building. My employer purchased a very large office building with all the furniture inside, which seemed like a great deal until we found out that all the furniture was from the 1960s. You can see. But one of the things that my employer did back then was that they had individual cubicles, right? We remember. Anybody old enough to remember cubicles? Yeah, all right. Yeah, I see you. So, honest to goodness, one day, because we talked to the employers and we said, hey, we'd like this to be different. We were pioneering the idea of an Agile team room. We said, we want a collaborative space. We don't want walls between the individuals on the team. And they said, well, we set up the cubicles this one way. Well, it turns out that Steelcase is held together by regular screws. So a bunch of us brought screwdrivers in, and we just reconfigured the space, flipped all the cubicles around so the doors faced each other, and now we had a team room. And you can see that I did things like I pulled the panels out so I could get some light through the window. And then we bring in the nice stuff to decorate. But the point was, and in fact, I'm exaggerating the story a little bit. The actual truth is that we made friends with the Steelcase guy. And we said, but if you didn't tell your boss, could you flip our cubicles around? And he helped. So that's an example of a couple things. Renegade self-organization. We didn't ask for well, we did ask for permission. We got told no, and then we did it anyway. And also, relationship, the power of networking and relationships to get what you want, which was make friends with the Steelcase guy. He knows how this stuff goes together. He can make sure it's not broken. So that was pretty important. So we created, oh, you can't see it because it's real dark, but this is a sofa. That's my desk. Little team collaboration space. There's my golf balls, right? Like, we made it our space. We made it fun. And so I think thinking about maybe it's not a good career move for you to disassemble your own office furniture. I'm not saying I recommend that. I worked in the government. It was really hard to get fired. So, but as a metaphor, what can you take into your own hands with your own team to make your in-office experience more pleasant and more successful for all of you? And the first way that you do that is by talking with each other, but also by thinking, what don't you need permission to do? Some of you, like people I've been talking to, might be struggling with really difficult policies, right? Really restrictive policies. And so again, it's where can you subvert a restrictive policy and work as a team to overcome that? Let's talk about some obvious examples. So if you have to be, these are my colleagues, it was his birthday. We decorated with Post-its because we're very agile like that. If you have to be in the office, I'm going to say from a starting point, we talked about some of the pains, but some of you also acknowledged some of the good things. The first, I think, and most important thing to help yourself with a successful return to office is to really think clearly about what some of the things were that we were missing over the last 3 years that we can have in person, and make sure that even if you hate being in the office, you hate your commute, you hate your policies, make sure that you are actually doing the things that are good about being in person. It would be really easy to be angry and resistant and say, I'm not going to participate in returning to office at all. And my feeling is, if you take that approach, you're only making yourself and your team miserable. Now, this doesn't mean you like the policy, but it means you're going to go look for the good parts and at least do those for yourself. It's not a gift you're giving to your employer. You're doing it for yourself and your team. So for example, most of you said that you're back in office part-time. I know, like, I was reading news articles about this as well. Like, how many of you are back in the office part-time and you spend part of your days in the office on Zoom calls with the same people that you were on Zoom calls with before? Thank you. How frustrating is it to drive 2 hours to be on the same Zoom call? Not great, right? So the least you can do, and many of you are already doing this, is talk to your teammates about, first of all, which days you're going to be there, and then work together as a team to think about which meetings would be the most effective in person. They're not every meeting. Not all meetings are created equal, right? Some meetings benefit so much more from interaction than others. Be thoughtful about which ones those are, or which ones there could be. Now, Chris Stone today is going to tell you all about retrospectives. Retrospectives is a really good candidate for a meeting that is better in person because you can workshop so many things. There's so many activities that we forgot how to do as Agilists because we had to move them into Miro or whatever. And Miro is great when you need it, but think about all the stuff with the Post-its and the Sharpies that we quit doing. Planning. If you have to do a planning meeting, setting a sprint goal. To me, those could be really effective in person. It opens up the opportunity for more different kinds of facilitation. So what if you and your team agreed that those meetings should be done on the days when the most of you are in the office together? What if you all agreed that you'll all try to be there on Tuesdays so that you can hit this meeting? Or you have to be there on Monday anyway. Let's make sure that meeting is on that day. Right? How many of you have a team agreement that has a no meeting day? You have a no meeting day? No meeting days are awesome. Don't make that your in-office day. Don't do that. That's ridiculous. The whole point is it's a focus day. If you're at home, that's a great way to spend a focus day. So this is just a simple thing that you can start to do is talk to your team about how to maximize the benefits of being together. Next, how many of you are in places with more than one team and you have to maybe collaborate or have dependencies on other teams, right? Dependencies are pretty normal. To me, one of the most frustrating things is trying to manage dependencies with another team when all I have is Zoom and email. Because I'm totally dependent on when that person's going to get back to me. I don't know what's going on in their world. There's so much that I'm missing. Well, if I think back to when I used to work in office, let's give an example. I had a dependency on the infrastructure team because we hadn't invented DevOps yet because I'm real old. Right? So we had an infrastructure team, and whenever I wanted to deploy, I had to fill out a form that got sent via email to the infrastructure team, and then they would wait several days and send back a thing that told me everything I did wrong and why I can't deploy yet. This is why DevOps is good. But the thing that I figured out was that the head of the infrastructure team really liked barbecue. Barbecue is one of my favorite things in the whole world. And so I said, hey, Pete, you want to go get lunch? I know this great new barbecue place, walking distance, and we'd go. And so he's chowing down on ribs, and that makes him really happy. And that's when I put my question, hey, what do I got to do about this 60-page form for deployment? Is there anything I can do to speed that up? Well, Rob, not Rob. He's eating his ribs. And he spilled all the secrets, which was 90% of the questions on the 60-page form had nothing to do with me and my team. It had to do with other teams who had screwed him over in a number of interesting ways. And I could, sympathy, right? Nod, very serious. And so I could say, hey, Pete, which parts of that form are actually important for my team? So, for you, just these 3 fields. Sounds great. I'm buying today, right? My point being, I didn't have all the tools that DevOps gives us, but I was able to use the power of a personal relationship, and not just for mercenary reasons, only a little bit, but by actually listening. His team had a lot going on. His team got a lot of really stupid deployment requests from other teams that slowed them down, and that made them slow me down. And so I can listen, I can empathize, and I can say, how can I help you, Pete, to deploy? Let me help you deploy my software faster. This is something that was really, really difficult to do anything like that when we were fully remote, right? Because I have to get on Pete's calendar. I can't offer to take him somewhere that puts him in a good mood. Instead, I'm jammed in between his other meetings that he's rushing off to. We don't have a personal connection. I'm not listening empathetically. Maybe I am on Zoom, but it doesn't come across the same way. So think about this, because then the next step is, when I need something from the infrastructure team, or I need something from the enterprise data warehouse team, again, I don't have to go get on their Calendly for 2 weeks from now. Instead, I'm going to go stalk the coffee bar and wait for John from Enterprise Data Warehouse to show up for his morning coffee. Hey, John, how you doing? You remember that thing where I brought down your Enterprise Data Warehouse last week because my team wasn't tracking performance? How can I help you so that my team doesn't do that again? Can you give me some information about the best ways to query data out of your system that I'm dependent on? Sip, 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 right? So, hanging out near coffee, walking to a collaborator's desk to ask them, how's your day going? Is there anything I can help you with? By the way, I could use a favor. In that order. Really hard to do that remotely. Do that in person. If you need to find out what days they're in the office so that you can stalk them, do that. So, meeting other teams. And then, of course, make your space welcoming. Do you all have assigned desks, or do you have that awful hotel desk thing? Anybody doing hotel desks? Oh. Do you have at least lockers? Put some stuff in? Okay. All right, so I think sprucing the place up a little bit, making it a little bit more friendly and a little bit less like a mental institution is nice. Remember when we used to have pictures of our families at our desks? Right? It's going to be 18 hours before I can drive home and see them, so I might as well look at them right there. Mine is my dog's, but, you know. All right. So now let's take that to the next step, which is thinking about how we can add a little structure to some of the one-offy things I just talked about. So the idea is, how many of you now are using team working agreements in any way? A few of you. Good. All right. I am a big believer in working agreements as a lifestyle. I love working agreements. I love things being explicit between me, and I'm going to talk about using these interpersonally in a few minutes. But as a team, to me, these are indispensable. Now, very recently, a couple months ago, I helped to kick off for a brand new team, and this very well-intentioned gentleman who has been primarily a Scrum Master came in with a 4-page document, and he said, these are the team working agreements that I always use. Thud. I said, so we immediately have a problem, which is that that's not what a working agreement means. Which team did you think this was? This is a brand new team. And so he had a thing that has some validity to it, which is these are working agreements I have used in the past successfully with other teams. Awesome. Great. Love that. Are we going to just copy-paste them to a brand new team that hasn't even met each other yet? Please don't do that. I actually really liked if we take that concept from Martin this morning of humility, that we come in and say, here's what I've seen that's worked in the past, but I don't assume that it's going to work for everybody. These are brand new people. They might be bringing their own ideas that might be even better. So, first of all, your team working agreements should be constantly changing. They should be, because your team is a complex adaptive system. That's why Agile has us retrospect. That's what that's for. One of my least favorite things about retrospectives, I could gripe about it all day, is teams who go into the retrospective, they generate a bunch of complaints about things that are happening outside of their team that they cannot fix, and then the meeting ends. That's not what retros are for. Retros are to inspect your own behavior and adapt it as you need, including adapting your team's behavior to cope with things that you can't change from outside. That's what a retro is for. If your team is not doing that, I suggest that you start doing it at them. What is something you can change? And so the team working agreement, the team working agreement and the retrospective, hand in hand, right? Just like that. They go great together. And what you're constantly doing is checking up on, is this thing we agreed to when we kicked off still working for us? So that could include, the obvious stuff is calendaring, but it could also include things like we have a no meeting day, team lunches, fun stuff. Some teams that I know say that we will have, we used to say first 10 minutes of every meeting was witty banter, because we knew everybody was coming in late. Might as well make it fun. But you could also have, one of my favorites is meetings start and end on time. But that doesn't mean what people often think it does. I say the meeting starts when it starts, even if everybody's not there yet. Right? It's not a stick that you're whacking people with to say you must be there on time. It says you're an adult. If you're late, we assume you had a reason. It's up to you whether that was a good reason or a bad reason. We are starting on time. When you arrive at this meeting late, we will not stop the meeting to catch you up on what you missed. That's your problem. Your job is to figure out how to catch up. We will end on time. If we didn't get everything finished, we'll schedule another meeting. Right? Those are things that you can control. And they're not sticks that you're beating people with and saying, we demand that you get here on time, because the reality is, you had to pick up your kids, drop off your kids, traffic was really bad, last meeting ran over and it was with somebody that's more important than these people and could get you fired. We all know that stuff happens. We're going to be nice about it. So those are some great examples of team agreements. Right? Other team agreements could be things like there'll be an agenda sent out 24 hours ahead of time. I like that one because it enforces a little bit of meeting discipline. Any materials that people need to review will be sent out ahead of time, this amount of time. You could agree on that. And you can make exceptions to this, you're people, right? But there's lots of great things that you could agree. Remember that when you're thinking about policies that come from outside your team, you're not going to have a team agreement to change that policy. It's not up to you. But you can always have a team agreement to cope with that policy. How will you help each other? How will you work together to mitigate the impact of that policy? I'll give you a really stark example. This probably will not work for most people. An organization that I know did a mandatory return to office, and of course they have employees who have moved to other cities. And there is an employee on a team who was told by the company that they are required to relocate from California to Seattle, which is kind of not trivial. And the truth is, that employee has no intention of doing that. They're not going to do it. They're looking for another job. But in the meantime, they could be fired. And the manager of their team said, oh, no, they're trying really hard to find a place. Housing is scarce. They're trying. And the manager is working to buy time for that person. That's a really extreme example. But you could think about how might you help your colleagues who have a kid who's homesick on a mandatory work day? Can you help cover for them? Don't risk your jobs. That's not what I'm saying. But could you make an agreement? Hey, everybody on the team, those of us who have a little more flexibility in our schedules, let's move our working in the office day to a different day because this person's got a kid at home sick. Let's move our retrospective so that we can all be together in person. How can you help each other? Don't risk your jobs. It's not worth that. But what can you do to help work around some of these policies that make your lives more difficult? Because if you can help your team, your teammates can help you, we know that we're going to see that result in the product, even if your employer doesn't know or doesn't care. This one is one of my favorite team agreements, and it's a little bit counter. So I want to talk about the fact that hybrid meetings suck. Hybrid meetings are the worst, the absolute worst. And so this was a team that had a policy, and it was actually standing policy for every meeting, was if one person is remote, then everyone's remote. And I will illustrate what we mean by this here. If you take a look at the green arrows, you can see that that is the same staircase behind 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the people visible on this meeting. And I think one of the other ones is at an angle where you can't see the staircase. I think it's this guy. So those people are literally at a bank of desks all in a row. They are literally sitting next to each other. There is visible in that one in the middle, there is an unused conference room. But because they have some people who are remote that day, and I think this team happened to have, this team is based in San Francisco. One of their people lives in Denver. And I've done the wrong way of doing this. I had a team based in Seattle with one member in Denver. And we tried everything. We tried having a laptop. We joked about making him a robot, building him a robot. But the fact is, when all of us are interactive in a meeting room, we're not speaking well into the microphone. The little automated camera doesn't pan very well when the conversation starts to popcorn. And it was a garbage experience for him. About half the time, he couldn't hear what was going on. We would do something in writing on the whiteboard, and he couldn't see it. So it's a great idea to be very mindful of which meetings are in person and have them be fully in person, and which meetings are remote and have them be fully remote. So I know that goes back on something that I said a little bit ago, which was that awful thing where you drove 2 hours into the office to be on Zoom. But if you need to, be thinking about your colleagues and how they can participate better. Because something like this the idea here was, we're making that remote experience equal for everyone. And really, with headphones today, with good microphones, there's no reason, even in an open office with hotel desks, that this can't work. That was a very noisy office, and people managed it. They got over-ear headphones if they needed them. Right? So this is a great example of the team working together to solve the problem of making sure that their developer in Denver was always properly included. Because that person's worth having on your team, so therefore it's worth making sure that they can contribute fully. Again, that precise agreement, maybe that works for you, maybe it doesn't, but it's an example of really thinking more creatively about how to make these arrangements bring the team closer together. How can you create an equal playing field for your team? Hey, does anybody remember? This was an actual work outing. That is not me on a kayak. That is me on the shore taking a picture of the kayak. But we had margaritas beforehand, which was awesome, right? So remember, too, and I know it's hard when you're commuting and you've left your family at home, but if you can, making time to have fun as a team, the type of fun you can have together, I know that we got really creative about team fun activities over Zoom. I worked for a company that used to send us, they sent us a succulent planting kit. And we all got on a Zoom call together, and we all planted succulents together in our homes. Right? That's the kind of thing you do when you have to. Right? I took my team to make cupcakes together. It was great, right? We took them to a cooking class together. It was great. So try to find time to also have fun as a team, and try to be okay with once in a while, not too often. It's worth it to arrange someone to pick up your kids, to spend a little bit of time getting to know your teammates as people. I promise you the benefits of that come back to you in a more pleasant working environment. All right, so now I'm going to transition a little bit, talk about some interpersonal. One of the things that I felt like when I'm working remote, I'm in my comfy office, and when I get pissed off at somebody, I do that, I walk out of the office, I go to the kitchen, I can make myself my tea in my cup. There is not a sign on my sink that yells at me about washing the dishes because it's my sink, right? I can go for a walk in my neighborhood. There's a lot of stuff I can do when I get frustrated that is a lot harder to deal with when I'm at home, when I'm in the office. One of the things that used to be a terrible trigger for me is my coworker, Mitch, love him so much. Every single day, you could set your watch by it. Lunchtime would come, and he would get out the bag of baby carrots. And he would sit next to me with the baby carrots. Crunch, 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 crunch. Crunch, 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 crunch. Crunch, crunch, crunch. I swear, half an hour. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Is he done? Is he done? Maybe he's eaten them all. Crunch, 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 crunch. I tried headphones. They did not work. And it took me a while to realize that Mitch's affinity for vitamin A was not a deficiency on his part. Like, that was not a bad behavior on his part. A man's got a right to eat baby carrots for lunch. And so I finally figured out that if I could set my watch by the baby carrots, that would be a super awesome time for me to go get a coffee. Long, slow coffee. It's the one with the extra shot. And then come back. Because he wasn't doing anything wrong. But it's really difficult when I've been in an environment that I created for my comfort for 3 years. And now I have to be back in the office and I have to wear shoes. I don't like it. Right? I have to try. There's so many things that I'm already uncomfortable about. So I'm on a trigger about the office is too cold. I used to be able to set my own thermostat exactly the way I wanted it. Now I'm back in office, and statistics show that women need the thermostat to be 2 or 3 degrees higher than most men. So most of us women are freaking freezing in the office. And we have to wear nice clothes, but then we got to cover them all up with heavy sweaters. That was me for years, right? So think about those little discomforts. There's a great tool that we can start to use to just share with our team. Not, I demand that you X, Y, Z. That's not what it's about. It's not a stick. This is an invitation to say, here are some things that I'm sensitive to. I might choose to put in my user manual, I'm cold all the time, and if I'm cold, I'm cranky. And if somebody would invent a USB-heated keyboard, I would be really happy, because the gloves do not work because I still have to type. Okay. So, but also, like, I'm frustrated when I don't get time to finish my thought. I don't care for being cut off. I love popcorn, chat, 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 chat. I do tend to interrupt people. I do not like being told, out, stop, we have to move on. So all I'm going to do is say in the user manual, I get it. Sometimes I go on too long, like now, right? Sometimes that happens. Here are some gentle ways to bring me back on topic and move to the next thing without hurting my feelings. So I can talk about anything I want in there. I use a lot of emoji in mine. All right. So what you can do as a team, and I have some ideas for these. I have some starters if you want to contact me of questions that teams can ask. You're going to keep this relatively work-focused. This is about how to make sure people are working at their best in the office together. So you don't have to bare your soul about your childhood or, your phobias, right? It doesn't matter. You're just focused on what helps you work at your best, and then you share with each other. And something that really helps that comes out of this is to think deeply about how every member of your team is so different and what they need is so different. And if you can approach this as a team with the spirit that being different is okay, it doesn't mean we will accommodate every single thing you ask for, but as a team, we want to understand each other and try our best. That, to me, sets a really positive spirit that I think influences everything else that happens after that. So that when you have disagreements as individuals on the team, something you can do is go back to somebody's user manual and think about what are their communication styles? What are their preferences? Are there ways in which this conversation could be better? Are there ways that that might have been a misunderstanding? Maybe they're just having a bad day. Traffic was extra bad, right? It is a way to start to bring people together to solve those problems. That's my boss. I'm totally about to strike her down with my lightsaber. But there are other ways to be healthier in our ways of resolving conflict. One of my favorite tools that I do not have time for, so working agreements are here, right? We can talk about any individual. If you can have a team working agreement, you can also have a working agreement between individuals. Hey, when you do this behavior, what would you like, how would you like me to respond? I'm going to come to, this is a tool I found incredibly helpful. How many of you have heard of nonviolent communication? There's a book. Yes, 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 yes. Highly recommend it. This is very therapy, but there's a lot of stuff we do as Agile practitioners that is a lot like therapy, right? Okay. A couple things that are really important. Being able to make objective observations. Not saying, you disrespected me, but saying, I noticed that you interrupted while I was speaking, and you did it last week too. Is there a way that maybe you could signal me when you'd like to speak? You know, that made me feel disrespected. See what I did there? I owned it. I said, that's my reaction. I don't know if you intended for me to feel that way or not, and I'm not going to accuse you. Just going to say, this thing happened. Were you aware that that happened? Did you even know you were doing it? When I interrupt people, I don't know I'm doing it. I mean, I know I'm an interrupter, but I don't know in the moment. And so it can make people really frustrated. And so we can have a working agreement that says, hey, when I've interrupted you and you don't like it, just put your hand up, right? Do something. Not very subtle. I'm not very subtle, so scratch your ear or something wouldn't work on me. I would miss that. But get my attention. I won't be mad if you do that because we have an agreement. I will know that when you get my attention, I'm going to stop and I'm going to say, shit, sorry. And I'm going to let you finish your thought. It's really important for someone like me because I tend to be really, really fast. I'm not always really fast with like high quality content. I'm just like thinking out loud. But oftentimes I work with colleagues who need more time to think. They need more time to gather their thoughts. Something that I've learned to do is actually, I've learned new methods of facilitation that create time boxes. I find that those structures are ways of getting me to shut the hell up without hurting my feelings. So those are good. So checking in on something like this as a technique for objectively looking at the behavior, identifying your feelings instead of assigning motivations to other people, and then thinking about what can you ask for that will help you resolve that conflict. Incredibly valuable when you're working alongside people. This works remotely too. It just comes up more often when we're crammed in a cube together. Finally, little shout out today to Charlie, who we saw this morning, because one of my other most favorite tools in the whole world is clean language. And he is teaching a whole workshop on it after lunch, and he didn't even pay me to say this. So I would urge you, if you're interested in figuring out how to help people get along better, how to facilitate conversations that are more effective, especially in situations that may be highly emotionally charged. Someone had a really bad commute, someone's worried about their sick kid. Different communication techniques can really help take that pressure off of you. So check that out, totally worth it. And that's it for me. Look at that. As promised, I didn't leave you any time to ask questions, but I would invite you all to please find me today. I'd love to chat more if there's anything I can do to help and support you. And achula bai for coming to my session. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Cheryl, so much.
Yay.
We actually had one very good question from the online speakers.
Oh, tell me.
Can I still challenge you for a minute?
Yeah.
Okay, I
Bring
left
it.
my phone, but basically the idea was that there is a company who is making people go to office on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. A lot of people don't like it
Of course
because
not.
they cannot extend their weekends. I kind of assume that I know your opinion about it, but can you comment on this?
Well, like a lot of policies, I think we know that imposing pointless restrictions on people does not make our working product any better. So helping teams to self-organize. Martin talked this morning about focusing on the goal or the result. Right? If your organization can say, these are the outcomes that we are looking for, and trust you to organize yourselves to achieve those outcomes, obviously I think that's better. So the question then is, your organization has access to that information, right? They can read Steve Dennings in Forbes just like we can, and they're choosing not to. So one thing that's maybe useful is to think about, what is your employer afraid of? When they're forcing you to be Monday, Wednesday, Friday, did they have a problem in the past that they are overreacting to? And what can you as a team potentially do to reassure them that you are going to deliver high-quality product the best you can? Because ultimately, even to an employer that cares about control or policies or whatever, someday they care about having a working product that they can sell. So if you can demonstrate, first of all, that you're going to work the best you can in those restrictions, make the best of it, do a good job. What you should not do is do a poor job and then tell them it was their fault. I mean, try it. Let me know if it works. I ain't never seen it work. So what you've got to try to do is, again, work together as a team to deliver the best result. And then see, over time, can you open up a little bit? Hey, look, we have such a successful track record of slaying on our estimates. We hit this milestone, this milestone, this milestone. Could we consider a little bit looser? You know, a little change here, a little change over here. We think we've earned it because we are delivering like crazy. That, to me, is, you know, short of getting a better job, that's your best defense. So I hope that helps.